Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Whatever time you're watching this video, welcome to the person and work of a leader. My name is Jules Glanzer, and I'll be your guide throughout this course. I hope you're not feeling like the picture you see in the slide. I one time showed this to a group of people, and someone from the back yelled out, "Hey, that's me!" I hope that you are not overwhelmed by all of the issues of life or by the political scene or by what's happening in the ministry that you're involved in. I hope that your feet are on the ground as we look at the person and work of a leader. Now, I don't want this to be a Christopher Columbus type of experience. You know the kind of experience he had. He started out not knowing where he was going. He arrived not knowing where he was, and he went home not knowing where he had been. And I don't want that to be your experience. So I'd like to just lay out for you what the next 6 weeks will look like. The first 3 weeks, we're going to focus on who am I? We'll look at a being-doing model of leadership. We'll spend some time talking about emotional intelligence and also about strength-based leadership. And the focus of this is looking at who you are as a person. And then week 4 through 6, we will look at what do I do? What are the activities of a leader? And we'll talk about change, we'll talk about motivation, and we'll also talk about leadership activity and the most important activities that I believe a leader needs to do. Now, you need to know something about me, and that is that I think leadership is just plain fun. It's an enjoyable adventure. It never gets old. There's always something new that needs to take place or that I need to learn about or do as a leader. And it's the thrill of shaping a group and of altering a culture, of developing a person, of taking a group of people to a place where they could not or would not go by themselves. I find that simply thrilling. You need to know that the person who's teaching this course enjoys the hunt and enjoys every aspect of leadership. I enjoy the challenges, I enjoy the thrills, I enjoy the accomplishment, I enjoy the relationships. You see, my life mission is to be a person of influence, inspiring and impacting with relevance and integrity the lives of those who would influence others. And so being and doing are kind of two aspects of the entire leadership activity and experience. Two aspects that kind of capture the different pieces of leadership. I found that these two things, when I think in those terms, do no more to help me understand what's happening than anything else, and to increase my leadership capacity. Leadership is being, resulting in doing. What that means is that you get to lead from who you are. However God has created you, however He has made you, all the experiences He's brought into your life, your leadership flows out of who you are. Who you are determines what you do, and what you do flows out of who you are. There's an integrity about your leadership. As this cartoon says, my long-range plan pretty much involves becoming a chicken, said the egg. And that's how leadership happens. It is a powerful concept for leadership to flow out of who we are. We are such incredible, complex beings. When you look at who you are as a person, your environment, your personality, your experiences, your relationships, your past, your personal best, your natural abilities, your spiritual formation, your values, your strengths, your behavioral tendencies, your emotional intelligence, your spiritual gifts, your broken world experiences, your relationship, God's calling in your life, and then throw on top of all of that, living a God-arranged life rather than a self-arranged life. And you are one complicated person. And all of that feeds into who you are. And who you are then determines how you lead. So I'd like to give you just a little bit of an example of that by sharing a little bit of my own life story, of sharing my being and how that has shaped who I am and how I lead. And I hope that as you listen to my story, that it will trigger things in your life that will help you as you do the assignment this week of discovering who you are as a leader and how that flows into your leading. So I was forced to go to high school. I still remember standing at that place in our kitchen, crying and begging my parents, please don't make me go to school. I hated school. It just, there was this disconnect for me and school. And my parents said, well, you have to go at least 2 years. I said, Dad didn't go to high school. All I want to do is farm. Why do I have to go to school? Go at least 2 years. And so I went to high school for 2 years. In the second year, my sophomore year, I went into algebra class, and the professor or the teacher stood up and he said, the following people I don't want in this class. And I was one of them. Now, ironically, just last week, I bumped into this teacher. I didn't know he was still alive, and we talked about that situation. But he simply told me, get out of my class. And so I walked out. I went down to the principal's office, and I said, what should I do? And he said, well, why don't you go to this class? I literally went across the hallway, and they put me, instead of into sciences and math classes, they put me into public speaking, accounting, typing, and business-related classes. That experience was something that God gave me that at the time I didn't know how it would affect me. But the things that I learned then, I am still using today almost every day as a college president. I was then, after going to high school for 2 years, I said, well, I might as well finish it. So I did. And then they enticed me to go to college. Go just for 1 year. And I said, well, okay, where should I go? They said, well, go to Tabor College. So I showed up at Tabor College. Just go for 1 year, and then you can come back and farm. I went for 1 year, and it was so much fun to be away from home. And college opened up my eyes to things I had never seen, I didn't know existed. And I began to learn. And my dad, when I left, said, there's 2 things you need to learn. One is how to speak in public, and the other is to direct the choir. How's that for an expectation of a parent for what their kid will learn in college? Anyway, I went 2 years, then I got married. Well, I better finish college. So I finished college, and my senior year, something started stirring in my soul. I began to realize that something was going on, that God was working and was showing me a different way. I had some incredible life-transforming experiences at college that I'd be happy to share with you privately or personally. I don't want to take the time up on this video. But I had some life-transforming experiences. And so many years later, when the college came to me and said, we would like to put the stewardship of this place into your hands, I gladly accepted that because I was able to give back to a place that had really shaped my life. I realized my senior year that farming wasn't where I needed to spend my life, and that rather I needed to go into ministry. Now, I knew nothing about ministry. I hadn't, except that I had done it just as a lay person. But I realized that if I was going to go into the pastorate, and that was a deep inner call, and outside external forces were shaping me in that way as well. And so I went to Mennonite Brethren Biblical Seminary. And while at seminary, I realized the importance of people. I had been very task-oriented up to that. I still am to this very day. But something happened to me at seminary, and that although tasks were important, I began to realize that relationships were important. So I was forced to go to high school. I was enticed to go in college. I recognized the need to go to seminary and then began pastoring. But then there was another stirring within my soul. I, somewhere in the early 90s, began to realize that the second half of my life was coming up and the world was completely different than what it had been when I started in ministry. And I needed to learn some more. And so I went to Fuller Seminary, began working on my doctorate. I got all the courses done and even did the work for the dissertation, but I didn't want to sit down and write it. And so I thought, I've learned what I needed to learn. I don't need a degree. I'm just going to stop right here. And then I went away for my normal 3 or 4 days at a quiet house for a solitude and silence retreat. And while I was at that retreat, there was this voice in my head, not an audible voice, but this suddenly kind of clear interruption that said, go back and finish your dissertation for the work I've called you to. I had no idea what that meant. But all I knew is that if I was going to listen to the voice of God, that I needed to go home and finish my dissertation. I didn't want to because I had learned what I'd wanted to learn. But because I was so convicted that that was from God, I went home, I finished my dissertation. A year later, George Fox Evangelical Seminary called and asked me to be the dean of the seminary, to lead the seminary, an academic institution, towards the church. I had no idea of what that would lead to, but I realized that it is always better to live a God-arranged life. And the whole idea of a God-arranged life popped into my head the morning that I was needed to decide if I would accept the invitation to serve my alma mater as the president of Tabor. And unlike many of my other new president friends that I had met, this was not something that I was seeking after. And when the call came first that they even wanted to talk to me about it, I turned just white as a sheet. I was in shock. And the conversation started and the campus visit. And finally, one day, the board chair called me and said, Jules, I think you need to get serious about this. The interview process has gone well, and you should expect a call from us sometime soon. It was an interesting interview process because I didn't want to do anything to harm my alma mater. And they knew who I was, and I had been involved in a lot of different aspects of Tabor College. But when the call came, I sat down and reevaluated my entire life. We went to the coast, and we just began thinking and praying and trying to hear what God was saying. At the end of the day, it's thought like, well, we probably won't go. But the next morning when I woke up, there was this clear message as I was sitting in silence in front of the fireplace. And the question came to me, do you want to live a God-arranged life or a self-arranged life? And I hadn't done very good at the self-arranging part. And so there was a clear commitment that, no, I want to live a God-arranged life. That's an important part of being if you're involved in ministry. Leadership is being, and living a God-arranged life is listening to him and then following and doing what he says. Now, this is the farm that I grew up on. It's a small farm in South Dakota. We tilled the land. We raised livestock. There was a strong work ethic. Church and faith were important. Family loyalty was important. And there was this determination that you are supposed to make something out of yourself. However, if you go to that same site today, this is what you will see. Everything has been demolished. As a matter of fact, even that white cylinder called a silo has been taken down now, and the barn has moved away, and the trees have been destroyed, and all you have is land. So what I grew up in and what is there now is completely different. This is the family that I grew up in. My dad and mom had lived their entire life on that farm, and they always talked about the day when all they would do is farm the land and begin to travel. They never used the term, but it was kind of, they were looking forward to semi-retirement. The bottom picture is their 25th wedding anniversary, and I'm in the tux, which is my choir tux for Tabor College, and I was asked to MC the program that they had at their 25th wedding anniversary celebration. Except something happened. When mom turned 62, she died. And the dream that my mom and dad had to travel and to see the world in the last phase of their life never happened. Something they had planned on their entire year, all their time together, never took place. Those two experiences, seeing my parents live their life for something that then they never were able to do, and seeing a farm that was a thriving farm be destroyed, instilled in me a sense of a there and a here. It ingrained deep within my soul that I want my life to be lived in a tension between here and there. That on the one hand, I live in the now and I live life to the fullest in the present. That I make the most of every opportunity that God places in front of me right now. And I want this world to be more the way God intended it to be. And I'm going to give myself to everything I do right now to make it a better place for everyone around me to live. And I want to live in this world and make it more the way God wants it to be. And I want my life to count for eternal. This is temporal, and it's going to go away. And I want to live in the temporal world, but I also know that it's going to be vanished. And it's going to be burned up according to the scriptures. And that what I do, I want to have values in the other side, in the there. And that I want the face of heaven to change because of what I do here. And so I want to infuse this world with the vision and values of the eternal, but I want to live now in such a way that I'm storing up things on the other side. Now, what I have learned is that that concept radically impacts how I lead, because I'm bringing together two different things that are very core in who I am. I don't know if you've ever heard of Kirby John Caldwell, but he's someone that I once did a case study in leadership on. He is the pastor of the Windsor Village United Methodist Church in Houston, Texas. He grew up, however, in the 5th Ward, which was extreme poverty. However, his father was a tailor, and his customers were the rich and famous of the world. And so he would be inside his house, and he would meet all the stars that came to his father's house and were fitted, and clothing was designed and made for them. He would step outside of his house, and it was a world of drugs and pimps and prostitutes and poverty and gangs and all the bad things that we see in many of our inner cities. If you go to his church, United Windsor, you know that he rubs shoulders and hobnobs to this day with the rich and famous, but he also is serving the needs of the community. His church, at the last time I looked at it, had 13 businesses that they owned. And they had established these enterprise zones, and they had established their own bank, and all of it was to help the community. He's a wonderful example of bringing together the world of business and the world of social concern. And he somehow married them in an incredible business way. How did he do that? When you look at who he was, he grew up with 1 foot in the world of poverty and 1 foot in the world of wealth. And now you see today that he is living that out. Leadership is being, resulting in doing. Who you are determines how you lead, and how you lead flows out of who you are. I'd invite you to pause at this point and simply think, how has your life been shaped? What have you done? What has come into your life that has shaped how you lead to this very day? Psalm 78:72 says, "And David shepherded them with integrity of heart. With skillful hands he led them." Heart and hands. Heart and feet. Heart and mind. Leadership is being, resulting in doing. Now, here is a way to get at who you are. And this is part of your assignment for this week, is to look at who you are and do a case study of who you are. So start with your background and historical information. Some people like to create a timeline of things that happened, or create a mind map or a mosaic of your life, and look at all the different things that have happened. And then put on that a description of situations and people that have influenced you, events in your life, who has influenced you, who has invested in you. I did something like this with the presidential scholars here at Tabor, and every one of them listed a grandparent that had influenced their life. So start with a historical background and then description of situations. Then think about the revealing moments, things that you did and you said, wow, that really reveals who I am. You know, when a group of people are sitting around a table and someone spills something, the rest of the people around the table all react differently. My reaction is to, someone quick, go get a cloth to mop it up. Another person takes what they have and just mops it up. It reveals a little bit about, I'm used to giving out orders, and somebody else is used to serving first. Decisions that reveal who you are, take a look at them. And then look at those defining moment experiences, events and incidences that shaped who you are. When I got my pink slip, because the denomination I was with pulled out of Houston and we were there to start churches, that was a defining moment in my life. It's one of the best things that happened to me, but it still was a defining moment because it altered how I functioned and how I lived in life. It shaped my values in new ways. Then do a root cause analysis of yourself. What causes you to act the way you do? There usually are situations in our family histories that just kind of carry over from generation to generation. In my family, there was an anger that just kind of permeated all of the Glanzer relatives. And I remember at seminary when I had to deal with that anger. And I began to realize that anger, which then was reshaped into, under the grace of God, into compassion, but it was what caused me to act the way I did, and even to this day, act the way I do. And the compassion that I have for people, the pastoral care that I have, comes out of having dealt with a root cause analysis of my life, which pointed to anger. And then all of us face central issues. We all have that personal issue that's always present in my life. What is it for you? I can tell you that for me, it's always been self-confidence. It's something that I've struggled with and worked to overcome. It's a central issue that I have had to deal with throughout my entire life. And then list some description of leadership situations. Where and how did you practice leadership, and analyze it? A personal best, a broken world experience. What are some leadership situations that you really did well, and what made them go well? Then step back and summarize what you see. And it's just possible that you discover when you go through all of this why God placed you on this earth. I'd encourage you to take time to do this, and don't do this in one sitting. I realize that you only have 1 week for this part of the assignment, but spend considerable time in reflection as you do this. Here's my life map. It's basically all of my life on one sheet of paper. Just recently, after 9 years of serving as a college president, I realized that the college presidency has shaped who I am. When I started serving, I wrote in my journal that I did not want to change who I was while serving as a president of Tabor College. But some 8 years later, when I was evaluating my own life and leadership, I had to realize that I have changed as a person because of the ministry that I have been involved in as a college president. And I wrote what I called a presidential creed, and then I ended up rewriting it to personal presidential responsibilities. And now I see it as a stewardship that's been placed in my hands. And so I just recognize that it has shaped who I am. This is an app that I use to create this. There's a lot of mind map apps out there, however it works for you. But take a look at who you are as a leader. Do you want to be like an onion, or do you want to be like an artichoke? What's the difference? Well, with an onion, you just kind of peel back and you start crying, and it gets worse and worse, and you peel back and all of a sudden it's all gone. An artichoke, you peel back, and suddenly you get to the heart. And it's the artichoke heart that we eat in salads. It's the artichoke heart that we have in hors d'oeuvres. I encourage you to peel back and to look at the heart of who you are. The person and work of a leader is about being and doing. Who you are determines how you lead, and how you lead flows from who you are.